Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Well, okay, let's start off this episode with a line that occurred to me during an incident that we'll get into shortly, which is basically, do not spam my mailbox with your ideology. Promise we're going to talk about the pandemic and the coronavirus shortly because there's a bit to talk about there, but it's kind of related, I guess. So we got this letter here, handwritten, and I had to say that I laughed when I saw it because someone took the effort to actually handwrite a letter, and it wasn't actually addressed to anyone. It's just addressed to the residents. So presumably, whoever these people are, they wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters, handwritten, and deposited them into mailboxes all through the building and whatever other building is there. And
what else is there to do during lockdown then?
That's right, because we're all bored and whatnot. So let's try and convert some followers to our cause. But it's just I read this and I was like, really, it's basically we're living in it. During this pandemic, many people have lost their faith. They wonder if God exists. How could He possibly allow sickness, suffering, and death? Is that how you feel? Now, I could go on and explain the rest of the letter, but I think you can kind of get the gist of where this is going because they conveniently provide you with a link and a QR code to sign up for their website and a program that will help you restore your faith and get you thinking positive and whatever else that they've decided to do. And I laughed because you're not talking to the right person here, and I thought it was hilarious. But then there was another component to this where I thought that it was a little bit like, kind of like the Nigerian email scam. They only have to get 5% to take it seriously, and then they've converted a bunch of followers to their cult, so that they can bolster their numbers. So I thought this was interesting to mention simply from the fact that there's the pandemic angle to this. So there's I don't know if it's too harsh to say this, but there's that manipulation, exploitative tactic of taking advantage of people's anxieties during a time which is has heightened anxiety for a lot of people, and it's targeting that anxiety in attempt to get gain for their organization or whatever it is that they're doing. And I found, after thinking about that a little bit more, a lot more insidious. And to be honest, this one was relatively benign. I can imagine that there would be some that would be worse running around the place too.
Well, this is the typical way that all sort of these, I guess, opportunities rely on. They rely on people being anxious and under stress. And at times like that, when other people arrive or we get communications that seem to solve our problems, it's human nature to sort of be attracted to whoever's providing the solution. So I guess COVID provides a great time to do that, but these things happen pretty much all year round for different reasons and different pressures on us, especially in modern society.
It's certainly the first one that I've received ever, I think, at least in this format. So I did find it entertaining. So thanks for doing it for our entertainment purposes. But just before we move on, again, just to reiterate, don't spam my mailbox with your ideology because I'm not interested.
No, they can't door knock in COVID times, you see. So that's
exactly right. I think this is a good point, actually, to segue over to just general behaviours during a pandemic anyway. And we'll get into sort of comparisons between how people were behaving during the Spanish flu pandemic as compared to now. And it's interesting that there's a lot of similarities there. And it's largely got to do with the fact that, with enough lockdowns, with enough restrictions, et cetera, and this thing just keeping going on and on and on, that, people reach sort of a breaking point. They can't take it anymore kind of thing. That's not to excuse the fact that, for instance, Melbourne went into its 6th lockdown on a couple of days ago, and within 2 hours of the announcement, there was a huge protest in the CBD, and I actually thought that was much more disturbing in that the fact that it was just seemingly organised that quickly, you could tell that someone's pressing a button on social media to get everyone fired up and out there and to act like idiots on the street, because I don't know what, who knows what they're trying to accomplish or whatever, but like looking back at some of those historical examples from the Spanish flu, it's not actually unexpected, actually, is it? Because it's something that's happened before.
Not at all, and this has always been my point. I don't think at any stage has the messaging really been right on this. Spanish flu went on for 3 years and COVID is going to go on for 3 years. And the fact that for whatever reason they kept on painting these pictures of hope and then taking away that hope really just puts people at odds with the government, because after a while the messaging sort of, tires. People tire of the restrictions, and it's not surprising that people start to not listen anymore. But it's clear, and was probably clear from the start, that with or without a vaccine, 3 years of this is probably likely. We'll wait and see if the vaccine shortens it in Europe and the States, where, I think they've really had a very rough time. But in Australia, where now we're only really experiencing a proper endemic outbreak in New South Wales, that is looking less likely all the time to be under control through lockdown measures, or the lockdown measures they have, then you realise that we've still got probably at least another year, maybe 18 months of this to go.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that was, I think, instructive in looking back at some of that historical information is that, people are, I guess people trying to do the right thing, for lack of a better term, are, horrified at these people running around doing their anti-lockdown, anti-mask protests. And yet you look back at some of the Spanish flu examples and there were people doing that as well back then too. And it's largely around the fact that they, don't want to be told what to do anymore. They're sick of their, lives being impeded in the way all of this has happened. And I think the key thing is this idea that people will listen in the beginning and then it kind of tapers off over time when they get tired of it.
Look, I've been very disappointed that the authorities didn't anticipate that. These sorts of messages and situations have been well researched across a whole variety of situations. So the idea that everybody is quite happy to lock down in the first 6 months and get through it is well known. But, if you think that you're going to maintain that strategy and keep everybody happy for 2 years or 3 years, I think you've got to be reasonable about this. And while those of us who understand the dangers of COVID and the situation we're facing might appreciate the reasons to social distance and wear masks and lock down when we have an outbreak, I think it's a little bit short-sighted to call the people that sort of are probably not doing the right thing by all of us. It's a little bit short-sighted, I think, to immediately condemn them or to go heavy-handed on them, because all you do is you entrench their dissidency. And it's a fine line, but I think, we have to be a little bit more tolerant, because these people are under stress. And I think this is what we're seeing, how it plays out. And to overlook the fact that, that they might be under stress, as opposed to just considering them purely as troublemakers.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. I mean, I'm sure there's a troublemaking element in there. There always is. But,
well, that was,
by and large,
I mean, that's one point before we move on. Just that probably is worth pointing out is just the advent of social media technologies that weren't available during the Spanish flu, and I think that element of the troublemaker that you refer to prey on others. That again, it's a bit like my little letter here from before that they target the people with anxieties, etc., and pull them in and stir them up and make them angry, and that like the protests that happened here. The other day was an example of that, because it was clear that it was well organised by a bunch of troublemakers on social media to get everyone fired up and out there. And I think that is an element that might not be new, because again, if you look at the Spanish flu examples, they were troublemakers there in the sense that there were people that were wanting to start it up, but the ability to organise now is a lot more easier for these people, and it's a lot easier for them to get their message out and to convince people to act the same.
Exactly, and as you mentioned, it's just like your letter. They're appealing to people who are stressed, who are under pressure, and don't know what to do. And suddenly, like this message appears that we should resist this or we should fight this, and it seems like a solution to what I'm feeling, and so I join. And this is the basic mechanics of how these things work. So, as a society, I think we have to be tolerant enough to understand that some people are going to behave like this. Obviously, as a society, we might not condone it, but I think somewhere deep down we kind of have to accept it.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on just finally and just talk a little bit about the recently announced vaccination targets that were announced by the government, etc. Sort of like the pathway out of our current issues with rolling lockdowns and whatnot, and so there was that target of an initial 70% coverage for sort of harsher restrictions to start being less of a thing, and then 80% to be to make like the idea of a lockdown the least likely option to take should COVID pop up. And it was an interesting thing that they finally nailed down some numbers in that respect, and it would seem that at the very least it's designed to encourage people to go out and get vaccinated. We won't go down the path again of the rollout, etc., because we've covered that before, because there are obviously issues with supply at the moment that kind of make that a bit difficult, at least until probably September or October. But it seems like they've provided a headline number, a figure to aim for, and now it's turned into a race kind of thing to get there.
Yeah, I think like everyone else, I'm really glad we got some numbers to aim for, and I think that's great, and that hopefully will encourage as many of us as possible to get out there and get vaccinated as quickly as possible so we can reach those numbers and we become safer as a society or a community. But I would hate to see them change or shift the goalposts once we get there.
Yeah. Because
the scenario we're facing is it would be a very brave politician, even if we're at 80% vaccination, to say, okay, we're just going to open the borders to New South Wales right now, and then watch it come through, because at that point there won't be any controls anymore, and effectively what you're saying is everyone's going to get COVID.
I wonder if there's one other aspect to this. Delta kind of changed the game plan. What happens if another variant comes out that's even worse, that's more transmissible, etc.? And you're talking about, shifting goalposts and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much of the public is going to be able to deal with the idea of yet another variant and it's entirely possible that another variant pops up that's worse and harder to deal with, and suddenly that 80% figure might not be good enough.
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but I'd hope that if there's a bright side to the Delta situation is that it's so successful with its replication rate that it'll be hard for another variant to outcompete it.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get stuck with Delta and we don't see any more variants. However, on top of that, you're right, there's these threats now. And I mean, the other thing that we know from the data we see from overseas is that COVID will go through the population, and vaccination is the only way to protect yourself from winding up, seriously ill. So, but are those numbers enough? 70 and 80%? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll find out later in the year, I guess. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. And maybe I might give these people a call in the letter. They've left their address and phone number on there, and I'll see how serious they are. I guess the only other way to go about this would be to letter drop everyone they letter drop to with like an opposite solution, perhaps. Maybe that's what I can do in lockdown in the next week, and write a whole bunch of letters to everyone in the building, offering an alternative.
Well, you could offer them like a little bit of solace by logging into SciTech Culture.
Indeed. I can provide a website, everything. Watch that subscriber number go up. Absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.